Good afternoon to everybody joining us today. Thanks for attending today's webcast, where we're going to be taking a pragmatic look at hurricane preparedness for your business, because hopefully, as all of us know, it's better to be proactive rather than reactive when it comes to this topic. So my name is Mary Owen. I'm going to be helping out our hosts today. They are Alex Ivanoff, and Alex is one of our territory account managers in the Southeast. He's been here for quite a long time, and during his long tenure at the company, I think he's served pretty much all of the areas that you guys are probably living in. And we've got also Stacy Budd on the line. Stacy is one of our pre-sales engineers, and he's also served this area for several years. So Alex, Stacy, and I, we all happen to also live in Florida. So like many of you, we were affected by the massive storms last year. And that's one of the reasons why we thought it was important to go ahead and bring this topic, to the forefront early, before the hurricane season starts, so we can start talking about these issues and getting people prepared. So as we're going through the presentation today, we hope you're going to have some questions. We'd love to answer those for you. So please send those to us using the question section of your interface, and we'll get to those at the end of the session. Today's webcast is also being recorded, so I'll be sending out an email to you guys later this week with a link to that so that you can rewatch it or share it as you wish. So with all that out of the way, take it away, Alex.
Well, thank you, Mary. Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us this afternoon. We really have a challenge, I would say, living in the Gulf Coast states. And as Mary said, I've managed the Gulf Coast states going on the better part of 15 years now with Arcserve. Every year we're looking at just the escalation of dollars and this devastation in our territories and downtime, quite honestly, from these natural disasters. So we could plan for them, but the reality of it is they're all different. And we need to adjust sometimes our plans to accommodate different types of scenarios that were presented. Maybe you have a plan A, maybe you have a plan B. So we're going to go through some of these things today, Stacy and I. I'm going to get into some more of the planning aspects of hurricane preparation, both on a personal as well as a business side of things. And then, as Mary said, if you have any questions throughout, please feel free to send those over to us, and we'll try to address those accordingly. So as I mentioned, the escalation of costs and damages over the past just couple of years has been, as you can see from this slide and projection, we're going from millions into billions. So in essence, we've hit the major league as far as damages go. And some of those factors don't even include storms like Sandy, for example, or Katrina, or my first experience with a storm back in the early 90s, which was Andrew. So one thing we know for sure, it's coming. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. Stacey, go next slide, please. So here's a couple of things we kind of wanted to, obviously our first responsibility, as family members and, to our kids and to our significant others is really making sure that we have personally everything in place to protect, our lives and the lives of our families. So here's a couple of things that we put together. It's commonly available. A lot of things I don't even think about, though, from time to time. As a matter of fact, once we do see the first hurricane coming across from the Weather Channel, my wife was on me 2 seconds later. All right, do we have our flashlights? Do we have our batteries? Do we have our, everything else that we need pretty much on this list? Another one that's actually not on this list, which I implemented during Irma last year, which I thought was pretty clever on my part. I actually took a blow-up air mattress, and I didn't have any protection for my screen door, my slider. So I actually blew up the air mattress, and maybe this is more peace of mind than actual functional protection, but I put it against my screen door. So at least I didn't have to see what was going on outside. And I felt like if worst case scenario, we could use that as a flotation device as need be. So, if there's some other things that you can see on this list that maybe you want to add into the Q&A thing, we'd love to hear your feedback on that. So really, what is this all about? It's really all about how we address downtime costs when it comes to natural disasters, disasters that happen, organically through some sort of fire. It's all kind of the same type of conversation. But how do you address what impact that has to your organization. And I'll give you an example. One of my clients in the Beaumont area, in Houston, right outside of Houston, Texas, their immediate disaster-related downtime was not to the actual storm itself. It was actually weeks later when sustainable sources of power and water actually made them move and evacuate some of their patients to additional locations without Texas. So if your systems are unavailable for an extended period of time, what is going to be that cost to your business? And who are your customers going to look to when your systems are unavailable? And at the end of the day is how is your company going to be able to recover? It makes sense that, cost and downtime is going to be on the rise because a lot of times all our systems are intertwined, right? There's not one system typically that runs everything. So as we affect different aspects of our business through multiple layers of complexity, we have to make sure that we're protecting that. The question becomes, well, what is that? Where do we actually, what information is important to our organization? What information is important for us to get down sooner than later? And so we go through exercises with our clients about data classification. If you're not able to pretty quickly answer, what is it going to take for my company to keep running quickly and efficiently, and a process to be able to bring that back online, then you have some serious challenges and questions that you have to ask yourself. Go ahead, Stacy. So what is your liability to your organization? I mean, you have multiple facets. As I mentioned, the employees, they're going to be looking at you for not only personal well-being, but the ability to, in essence, do their job. Customers are going to look to you for continuity of services, right? Many times, we're not obviously working in a vacuum, so we need to address our clients' needs and have that information and systems available to them in a timely manner. And then you're looking at vendors. Somebody like us, for example, how are we going to help you to be able to get back on your systems back online in a quick and easy manner? I would just give you an example. I mean, I was getting calls, midnight on the weekend that Harvey hit in Texas. Customers ask me, okay, what do we need to do? We have a plan in place already. How do we enact on it? And just really looking for some hand-holding throughout the whole process. Go ahead, Stacy. So here's the bottom line, folks. You can't be disaster-free. And as I mentioned before, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. However, we can, as much as humanly be possible, and I use the word human in there because we can't really prepare for everything, but you can, for the most part, be prepared for disaster to hit your location. Go ahead, Stacey. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about building a strategy, a plan. Now, when you talk about building a plan, this is something that you don't want to build in a vacuum. I like to use the three or the four components of a plan to be build, document, share, and test, which are highlighted in the screens. At the end of the day, you're looking at getting everybody in your organization involved from the top down on what expectations are. What do we need to have accomplished, whether it be personnel, whether it be systems, whether it be resources. That all has to be a buy-in from the top down. Everybody has a stake in the business operating in a reasonable manner, and that starts with careful planning up front. The sharing aspect of a plan is really important too. I actually had just a recent conversation with one of my colleagues that worked in IT, and they were actually getting together in a conference room to go over and executing their DR strategy. At which point, one of the managers there said, after they assembled in the room, sorry, some of you didn't make it. And that's really the sad reality is that, not everybody is going to be in the place where they need to be in order for things not to get things back online. I mean, things happen. Bad things happen in the casualties, right, in disaster events. So the best thing you could do is prepare with redundancy and contingencies in mind. And the last part of this is really a testing process. I mean, where you're talking about implementing a DR plan, your DR plan is only as good as you can test it out. As far as you might as well have a faith and a hope and a pray plan, unless you actually have a true DR strategy that you can test out on a regular basis. So, with regards to your systems and which ones are critical to your organization, data classification is huge, right? We need to figure out what's important to our organization. How do we get that information back online as quickly as possible, whether it's in a location that is serviceable and runnable at that point, or maybe in the cloud? And how often do we protect this information? Some data, not all data, as I mentioned, is created the same. So, do we need to back up more frequently? Do we need to get that information offsite more quickly? And then really, what contingency systems do we have to get applications and their dependencies online? Not every application is on its own. It has some sort of dependencies, like maybe a database, things like that we need to make sure that we're protecting in a timely manner as well. Go ahead, Stacy. All right, backup. And this is where we'll be doing for 30 years. The type of backups that you are looking to potentially achieve really depends on your recovery time and your recovery point objectives. How quickly can we get this information back online, and how far back do we need to go to get that information in a timely manner? I personally love to follow the 3-2-1 strategy. The 3-2-1 strategy is, in essence, having at least 3 copies of your data, 2 of which are local, but they're on different mediums. So maybe like removable drives, things of that nature, maybe tape, and then at least 1 copy offsite. Not only is that a best practice strategy for just backups overall, and recovering from things like ransomware, but it also is a very sound strategy for you to follow in your DR building process as well. Having that information in a destination offsite obviously is paramount to having a DR plan. But not only having that information stored in a DR site, information in a DR site is great. It's information though. But how quickly can we get that information turned on and operational, and then having our users have the ability to connect to that? That's something you have to ask yourself if you're currently capable of doing. All right, and then the last part is really about where we're going to actually put the data, whether it be an enterprise cloud, public cloud, a co-location. There's lots of options when it comes to offsite and stuff. High availability is the next level of backup. So we have the backup process, which in essence is your daily protection and replication potentially offsite. Where high availability seems to come into play for most clients is when they have very, very limited tolerance for downtime. We're talking within seconds or minutes. If high availability is, for example, of Exchange is a good example of that, where we could actually take an Exchange repository, replicate it to a cloud destination, maybe AWS or even a private cloud, or maybe even a co-location that you're managing, and in essence fire that system up with the push of a button. And that's kind of handy too when, let's face it, you have a couple of days to plan for something coming your way, and you just hit a button and you're able to get all your users moved over to that secondary site. All right, go ahead, Stacy. So there's 2 aspects. One is disaster recovery. The other one is business continuity. At the end of the day, they're one and the same. Disaster recovery, however, is a little bit more specific to the situation, right? Where business continuity is a direct variable of how we set up our business plans. It aligns more to what pieces and parts we're going to use to our business plan, right? What people do we need as part of the equation to come back up and running? As I mentioned before, in that one example where one of my colleagues got in a room and said a couple didn't make the situation. Well, you need to have the plans. Somebody else needs to know about the plan, right? Somebody else needs to be part of how we fix this problem. Which people are working and in what capacity? Again, sometimes you need to plan for those people not being available. That may be their core job today, but tomorrow that actually might not be a situation where you're able to rely on them for whatever reason. So minimal disruptions in your business critical applications are really what's important for continuity purposes and disaster recovery. So as a company overall, Arcserve, as I mentioned, has been in the business now for over 30 years in data protection, where we have a worldwide presence, not only from our customer base, but our sales and our partner base. And we've won a couple of awards over the last couple of years. I'm not sure if you guys have known that. A couple from VMworld itself, where we were able to walk away with the Gold Award for Best Virtual Backup Product. And oh, by the way, we do physical infrastructure as well as we do virtual as well. Go ahead, Stacy. So in essence, our protection is about a single pane of glass. How you're able to not only protect your local infrastructure via software or through hardware that you re-provision through your own investments, but also how do we get it offsite, right? So it's from point A to B to C. We have ways that we can actually show you through hardware means that you can protect data, and we'll get into this a little bit more in a bit, through our twice the power promotion, where we're actually providing 2 bits of hardware, one to create an instant DR link from your site to another site offline. And then the third step is really how do we get that information to the cloud. Stacy's going to get into some of the details on how we pre-package that information and really downsize it so it's able to be transferred from your on-prem location to your offsite, regardless of what methodology you choose to do. Go ahead, Stacy. Okay, I think it's time when I'm going to get into Stacy getting into a little bit more detail about this. Stacy, is that the next slide coming up, sir?
Yep. So we're going to focus on the actual solutions themselves, but without going into a feature function kind of overview. We may speak about some features, but I'm not going to get into the weeds. That's not the purpose of today. Today's purpose is just to kind of show you the different products that we have that will help you prepare and what is going to make those products stand out, right? And where they're going to be really the important features to be concerned with any solution, right, from that standpoint. So we'll definitely take a look at that, starting with the unified data protection from Arcserve, right? So when we talk about and again, hitting again on the checklist for companies, as Alex brought up before, are you backing up your data? Do you have disaster recovery in place or high availability in place? Do you have a software type solution, or if you look specifically at Arcserve, we have not only software solutions, but we also have cloud solutions, cloud direct solutions. So from a perspective of Arcserve, we have everything, right, from backup, disaster recovery, high availability, appliance solutions, cloud solutions, even software solutions that you can roll out. So definitely we're gonna go take a little bit deeper dive. When we speak to the UDP solution, I don't know if we go back to that slide, of backup. There was file-based backup, there was image-based backup. UDP is an image-based backup, and why that matters is it's going to be a faster backup because it's backing up an entire volume, and we would typically recommend an entire system. Right now, on top of that, it's going to give you the ability to do not only back up that data, but be able to restore at the volume level, right, and get those systems from a disaster recovery perspective up and running that much quicker, which is really what's going to be key here, because we're not really talking about backup. We're talking about how you're going to restore your data, how you're going to get that data back, right, quickly, and those kind of things as well. And of course, we're going to support your common applications and things like that too. We're going to work well against virtual and physical infrastructures, Windows and Linux infrastructures. We're just going to work well in those. Okay. When we look at the type of environments, we don't want you to think, hey, I'm not an enterprise customer. This isn't really for me. I'm a smaller customer. Well, we scale very well from small to large customers, right? Which is fantastic story of this product. If you only have one location, right, you could perhaps go to a cloud location. We'll talk about that in a moment as another DR site or something like that. Or if you do have multiple locations, maybe you can leverage those other locations as disaster recovery locations and be able to do that as well. So being able to do that too. Now, in some cases, your remote location may be 2 miles away, right? So is that really, a disaster recovery plan when your branch office is 2 or 3 or 10 miles away? Maybe not, right? And that's really when you should start looking, okay, what happens if, something, in this case, we're talking about a hurricane, and I'm in Florida, and I was lucky where I was a very limited power outage, last year, but, not too far from me, places were out of power for, upwards of a week. Okay, so definitely, easier. I think I was out of power for, I said I wasn't out at all. I think I was out of power for like 3 days, right? So I have a pool, it was a pool party, so it was, for me as just a resident, no big deal, right? But for me to be able to perform my job, it made it a lot more difficult to do those kind of things. When we look at, what within the UDP solution is really gonna shine, right, and be able to help with, performing these backups quicker, get the data offsite quicker, I'm going to start with infinite incremental technology, because with infinite incremental technology, you're backing up. You're taking the full backups out of your rotation, and this is giving you the ability to definitely perform faster backups. So now that critical data that I'm backing up, my RPO can be a lot more refined. I can back up multiple times a day because I'm backing up less data. I'm imaging the data through image software, so it's a much quicker backup already. Now I'm only backing up the change blocks, so the backups are going to be that much faster, less impact on the machines that are being backed up, the servers that are being backed up. So less impact, faster backups, back up more frequently, so that when you're recovering from a much more refined point in time, which for critical systems, that's going to be important. Okay. Then we're going to take on top of that, and we're going to dedupe that data from a global perspective, meaning what we write to disk and what we send across the wire is only going to be the unique data from a global perspective, meaning from all my servers, right, and my retention setting that I have in there. So it makes it a lot easier to use less bandwidth if I'm not sending full backups, if I'm not sending all my changes across there, right? So definitely, global deduplication helps with that. In a lot of cases, you'll see that you're not actually sending much data across the wire at all. Now, I do see some questions coming in. Keep those questions coming. We're going to address them at the end. We're not only going to talk about the UDP solution, I'm going to talk about our Cloud Direct solution. I'm going to talk about our high availability solution as well. We do support agentless backups for VMware and Hyper-V, right? So being able to support virtualization, being able to support physical with the same console, that we're going to be able to do that too. So a lot of companies out there, I would say a good majority of companies out there have already embraced virtualization. Maybe you're not on VMware Hyper-V, maybe you're on Oracle, or maybe you're on Citrix, or maybe on a different platform. We can still protect those too, right? We just protect them agent-based, and still we're within that same console, the same view, the same look and feel. And why is that single console kind of important? Well, it's important because at a time of a disaster, right, you don't have to be figuring out and having different interfaces. And again, it may not be you doing the restore or the failover or the switchover. It could be somebody else. You want to make sure that that's simple, that's straightforward, and that's definitely what we're going to bring to the table. We can also take those backups that we're performing, and we can convert them into virtual machines, standby machines. So it gives you, if you will, a third copy of your data. You have your source data, you have your backup data, now you have your standby machine. That standby machine could be remote, right, at a remote location, again, including cloud, right? So I could be going up to the AWS or Azure with that as well. Maybe I'm going to the Arcserve hybrid cloud that's about to be released, right? So definitely, multiple options there for that remote capability to spin that up, have it do some automated monitoring of the system so you can see that. Or as what happened, in my case last year, while I'm preparing for Irma to hit, and I'm actually at the location filling sandbags, and I had a customer call me because they wanted to spin up their standby machines at their other location and get everything transferred over there because they were evacuating, right? And this was down in South Florida, right? So definitely being able to plan for that, switch over everything as you need to get the best performance, because actual virtual machines are created and everything like that as well. Now, in the case of, hey, I don't have the extra storage, right? Or I need to spin up these systems from a different backup standpoint or something like that. We don't need to have that third set of storage, right? We could also emulate that the backup is a virtual machine. You lose some performance, but it gives you another level of capability within the product. And on the Linux side of things, being able to do that remote as well, right? And with instant bare metal recovery. So these are some other features that are going to help. And what doesn't really, I don't think is highlighted on there, is these can be remote as well. They don't need to be local. So as long as you have data in another location, you should be able to spin those up and be able to do that too from an emulation standpoint too. And then we can take your critical systems, your most critical systems, and with UDP, we can perform full system high availability, where we can take and continuously replicate the changes at a system level over to a standby system. Again, it could be a remote location you have. It could be something like Amazon, where we're going up to AWS and we have that capability. And we're protecting the operating systems, the apps, the data. We're protecting everything with this, right? And give you the ability to not only fail over, but fail back that data too. And then at the end of it all with UDP, right, not only being able to protect your data, right, and be able to fill up or bring up those systems and fill back those systems, but I'm not a trusting person, right? So I believe strongly in testing. That if you're not testing your solution, then you're at worst time to wonder if it's going to work is when you're actually under the gun, right? So with Assured Recovery, it's an automated DR testing platform, right, where we can go through and we can spin up those systems. You can run scripts as part of that Assured Recovery test to test things like applications. Are they gonna come up as well? Not only will the system start, because that's only half of it. Being able to boot up a server, fantastic. Is my SQL database going to work? Is my Oracle database going to work? Is my, in some cases, my QuickBooks stuff going to work, right? Depending on what is very important to you, right? Being able to run those tests on top of that to be able to do that and automate that, right? Because we all get busy. We all have, networks that go down. We all have phone systems that go down, or changes that are getting rolled out, and that needs to be the focus for this month or next month. So testing a lot of times gets pushed aside. With Assured Recovery, you can now address that and automate that testing as well, right?
Thanks, Stacy. So I mentioned this before that we're running a promotion right now, and I like to call this DR in a box, even though it's called Perfectly Paired Innovation, which in essence is what it is. But we're actually providing a situation where customers that are needing of storage space, as Stacy said, we're image-based to disk utility. But what we're doing is, in essence, providing you the storage to be able to store that information following the 3-2-1 rule that I brought up earlier. So 2 appliances, of which you pay for 1, and then we're giving you actually additional capacity and then a way for you to get it up to the cloud. So, if you're currently in a situation where you're evaluating your backup strategy and say you don't have the space to store as a backup medium, this is a perfect example as to where you can actually do that as a DR in a box scenario. That's Stacy.
Thanks, Alex. And as we said, we're not here just to talk about UDP. We're here to talk about, all these solutions that we offer that are going to help you kind of address the needs that you have, for disaster preparedness, right? One of those solutions, right, was UDP. Another one is our Replication high availability product. Now, the full system side of this is available in UDP, okay? Now, what we also bring to the table with Replication high availability is an application level, a file level, right? So if maybe I don't want to protect an entire system, but I want to protect, specific applications, SQL, Exchange, Oracle, different things like that. Well, SharePoint, we can just continue to name them. You could do custom applications. So again, it could be applications that you don't even see listed on here. We could provide that continuous protection for those systems too, and be able to replicate that data across. We can also take and perform what we call scenario group management, where I can create a group or a scenario group, and I can add servers to this, and I can have multiple servers in this group, and I can do things like boot order. So if I need to fail over, and let's say something like a SharePoint farm, right? I need certain servers to come online before other servers, right? Or maybe it's just as simple as making sure my domain controller is the first one that spins up on the other side, right? So all those kind of pieces are going to be critical, right, for group management and boot order and those kind of things as well. Sometimes it's like it's a web server, it's IIS server, something like that, and it's got databases behind it, database servers, things like that. Just making sure that all those servers come up in the right order for everything to work and be happy, right? Also, continuous data protection. So tracking those changes, giving the ability to roll back those changes if you need to do that as well. Always going to be critical, right, in those cases. Not only, for the case of like a hurricane preparedness, but then also for things like ransomware or something like that, being able to roll back changes, always going to be important there too. Again, automated DR testing, always going to be very important. Again, we call it assured recovery, even with this, with the high availability tool. Being able to take and bring up that system, run custom scripts against it, and then do this frequently, not once a year, not once every 6 months, but as frequently as you want to schedule it to be. It could be daily if you wanted to, right? So all of our assured recovery is as frequently as you want to schedule it to run. So you can absolutely, be assured that your system, is going to be able to spin up and be able to start and everything like that as well. Now, it's all great and fine if you do have, the ability to go to a colo site or something like that, but a lot of companies don't have that, so we do support with this also AWS, being able to go to an Amazon cloud environment and be able to perform that high availability at public cloud location like AWS there too. So very, very important be able to do that. And I don't know if I mentioned it, maybe I think probably saving it for the end, but all of our solutions, whether we're talking backup, whether or not we're talking replication, high availability, you're able to, of course, encrypt that data, secure the data in motion at rest, so that it's not going over the wire. That's going to be important for for healthcare, for government, for just about everybody out there. Financial data, legal data. I mean, I think that should be important. We definitely can do that. We also do, support WAN optimization. So we're not only going to just send your data over the wire, we're going to reduce, the data that needs to be sent over. We're going to have multiple threads open for that, so that we can optimize that. If your replication or your high availability gets, the replication side of high availability gets interrupted midway through, you're able to repick where you left off, right? If you're able to do that, or if you're able to get the system back online, right, as opposed to like a failover scenario. So definitely having that WAN optimization built into the product is going to be important. We also include a mode in this where we call it assessment mode, where you can take and you can see what your changes are and kind of how much bandwidth am I going to require? That's a question I get quite frequently. How much bandwidth do I need to support a high availability solution or a replication scenario? Well, it always kind of goes back to the customer. How much data is changing? Not the size of the data, but how much is it changing, right, over time, right? And that will kind of govern how much, bandwidth are you going to need between your two locations and those kind of things too. So very important mode to be able to run that automated, test that kind of show you those requirements and everything like that too. And we mentioned encryption, being able to encrypt that data during the transfer is going to be very important to you. With something like backup, it can be encrypted in motion and at rest. Now keep in mind something like high availability, that data is like live data sitting on the other side. It's not a backup, right? So it's going to be encrypted in motion instead, that piece of it. But when it lands, it's going to be an actual server that's running and those kind of things. So that would not be encrypted. Okay. And we're going to wrap it up with our Cloud Direct product. Okay, Cloud Direct is going to be our direct-to-cloud solution, which is available as backup as a service, which is great, or more importantly, disaster recovery as a service, which is what we're going to be focusing on here today, right? The disaster recovery as a service standpoint. RTO, the time to fill over those systems, we want that goal to be, less than 5 minutes. It's going to be really the boot time of your servers. We're going to work with you on your connectivity, right, to those servers, on how we can pre-plan that and build a plan ahead of time. So, do you need point-to-point connectivity, site-to-site connectivity? And I meant to say point-to-site connectivity, right? Your point to our site, or site-to-site connectivity. Those are all going to be, capabilities that we're striving for with this. We want it to be as easy as pushing a button and failing over to that. And definitely that's a goal that we aim to hit. So when we look at key features of the direct-to-cloud solution, right? No on-site, infrastructure required. We can keep a local latest backup on site if you want, but there's no need for that local backup, unless that's something that you want for faster recovery on there, as far as that goes. When we look at, security of that, right? Your data is going to be transferred over SSL, so it is going to be encrypted. We can turn on Google two-factor authentication, which is another layer of security for you. So definitely, layers of security and integrity for that too, right? We're going to mirror that data within our data center too. So it's not only we're protecting it from your standpoint, we're protecting it in our data center there too. Again, ease of use is always going to be important when you're talking about a DR scenario. So web-based management, being able to log into that web from anywhere. Okay, so it's, you don't have to be on site to log in and perform the failover, the disaster recovery side of things too, and being able to recover from multiple recovery points, right? So being able to choose that where you're recovering from, and being able to automate some things like SQL protection, exchange protection, backing up entire servers, or just files. And some data you don't need to have the DR side of it as much. Let's just make sure we're backed up, in those kind of things. So we do offer that with the backup as a service. We look at the backup as a service architecture. I'm going to blow through this because really what we're really concerned about here is I have my server, I'm backing, I can manage that through my portal. It's backing up my local data, it's sending it to the Arcserve cloud that's then going to an East Coast or West Coast data center, right? When we look at disaster recovery as a service, right, it's going to be to the next level of that. Right, so same kind of infrastructure as that goes. We're going to have my data. I'm going to back up that data either to the West Coast or East Coast, New Jersey or California, and then we're going to take and we're going to give you the ability to have that push button recovery. Right, so I go into my console and I tell it to activate that system, and it brings it up. Right, be able to go in and perform that failover in a few minutes, the boot time of that. Okay, unlimited scalability, right? So whatever retention that you need. Sometimes for DR, I see customers, they only keep a week of backups because that's for disaster recovery. They still have their backup data, right, which is for retention and everything like that as well. So it kind of depends on how you want to build that plan, and we'll work with you on, on the end result of that plan. Right now, from a support, right, we're there for backup, for failover, failback, all product with all those requirements that are within there. Being able to integrate with Active Directory, right? Being able to protect, physical servers, virtual servers, VMware, Hyper-V. Being able to, pre-provision, right, cloud network, right? Your VPN, your firewall, and those pieces as well. From a perspective of platform support, we have a bare metal or an agent that gets installed on your bare metal systems, right? So we can support those systems. We can install an agent on Hyper-V to be able to agentlessly back up those Hyper-V guests that you have and be able to back that up. Same thing for VMware. We have a virtual appliance that you can download as an OVA file. You deploy the OVA, which is about the easiest thing you can do. It discovers your environment and you enable those systems for backup, and then you can build your backup policy. Now with Cloud Direct, right, we're giving the ability to back up those systems. I mean, with disaster recovery as a service, we're giving you ability to back up those systems much quicker than we are with something like backup as a service, right? So when we look at the architecture, just one last time here, you have your servers, whether there be virtual servers, physical servers. You're going to transfer that data up to the Arcserve cloud. You're able to then trigger that failover from the portal anywhere that you can access, and you can get to the internet, right? You're connecting into our cloud infrastructure and being able to do that. By the way, this is owned and managed, or I should say operated and managed by Arcserve. So in the case of your failover, you're not going to be picking up the phone, calling Arcserve, and we're going to transfer you to some other company. Your whole experience is going to be working with us, because this is Arcserve infrastructure that you're going to as far as that goes. And then the key last piece of that is failing that data back, transferring that data back over to your systems once they're back online and you're ready to go. Okay. So we do have some time. I managed to finish about 4 minutes ahead of time. We usually like to leave about 15 minutes, for questions. I do have a few in the queue, so we're going to go ahead and handle those questions that are sitting out there. I do urge people, if you have questions, continue to send the questions while we're answering these. We have a question around real-time recovery using backups, right, and things like that as well, timestamps. Then also I think that we definitely cover, the ability to protect your data, with different solutions, with backup solutions, with high availability solutions, so you're continuously protecting your data as far as that goes. It really depends on the value of that data, right? How important is that data to you, that application? What's my RPO that I require? Can it be 15 minutes? Can it be 30 minutes, right? Or do I need to have more of a high availability approach to that too? When talking about offsite requirements, right, and being able to do that, power grids, right? Definitely, I would think of having my DR location on a different, at a different location that's not going to be by the same power company or in the same power grid. You definitely want to have that as well, right? When you think about where that DR location should it be, another Gulf state location that maybe it's 100 miles away, but it's still on the Gulf Coast, right? It's still only 2 miles away from the Gulf. For like I am, believe it or not, I'm probably like less than a mile away, right? So you definitely want to take that into accommodation when you're looking at that too. So you're not only looking at the solutions, you're looking at your disaster recovery locations, right? Your continuous protection, where you're going to, and that's why solutions like ours going to the Arcserve cloud, which definitely you can go to the other coast. You'll definitely be on a different power grid. The likelihood of the West Coast getting hit with a cyclone and the East Coast getting hit with a hurricane all at the same time, probably going to be slim. But then what, you could even have some redundancy built in there, so that we're not only protecting that within our data center, we're sending it back over to another data center, our other data center on the other coast too, and have multiple redundancy in there as well. So definitely those are key considerations that you should take into account when looking at that too. Alex, I got another question here. around DR options for single site companies. What do you have to kind of comment on that? What do you think companies that don't have DR locations?
Yeah, and then that comes up a lot, Stacy. Most of the companies that we deal with rather is they are single site, right? And so where those that do have multiple sites have the luxury of maybe putting some IT infrastructure, at those sites to create a replication link. I still want to make sure that we're focusing on some best practices here too. So somebody mentioned something about site disaster before. Best practice right now is at least 100 miles away from source to destination. Although in the case of Irma here in Florida, that pretty much covered the entire state. So that's not even a guarantee, but at least 100 miles is a good best practice. Now, for those that don't have another site, we have some options, right? The twice the power one, I think, is a good one, where I've been talking to a couple of clients that are looking at protecting their information on one appliance locally, and then the appliance that we provide to them at no additional cost, they're having sent to a colo at a hosting location. That's one option. The other way might be is go cloud direct. There's no need for hardware to be locally to actually be the middleman, so to speak, for that information. And we're sending it right up to our cloud, which, as you pointed out, are far away from the Gulf Coast states and not in dangerous way. So that would be a couple of ways that I would approach those, Stacy.
Sure, and I'd like to add, be able to do things that go up to public cloud too, right? To
Yeah, for
be
sure.
able to do that too. We have some companies that they have requirements. They're standardized on public cloud infrastructure that's out there. So being able to support that is going to be key too. Definitely, good answer there. When we look at a couple other questions here, bandwidth, I think I kind of hit on this as we went through, but just to elaborate on it a little bit, bandwidth, is really going to be dependent on the solution that you have. Don't automatically think I don't have bandwidth in order to send my data offsite to another location, right? If you're using something like our UDP product, that product is not only grabbing just the incremental changes, the block level changes, it's grabbing the unique data out of there, and you'd be surprised, with the bandwidth requirements that we really don't require too much bandwidth in order to send that data. Now, it does depend on data changes and the overall picture, and the best way to kind of get an idea of that is running a trial, running a test, kind of looking at that from that standpoint, do some testing. But, and then definitely with Cloud Direct, another case where I get customers all the time that they don't think they have enough bandwidth in order to support, sending data off to the cloud. Once you get that data seeded, right, and once you have that in case, then it really comes down to your change rate, right, and then that's going to be what's important compared to, your not the actual amount of data that you have, but the amount of change that you have. Right, and that's going to be the key there too. Quite frequently, we have customers that even during the seeding process, right, they want us to send them drives and everything else, and what they'll find out is, I actually am able to replicate all my data faster than we can get it seeded, through a manual process and everything like that too. So again, it comes down to amount of data, amount of change is really going to be key there too. That's why trials are in place, so you can get an idea of what that looks like, and we can get a better idea on our end as well, right? Especially from
Hey,
that.
Stacey.
Yeah.
I wanted to add on that too, that I get that question a lot too, is, we're storing all our information, multiple terabytes of information in the cloud. And a lot of times the concern for my customers is, well, how do I get it back? What's the process? What does it look like? What kind of downtime am I looking to experience by getting that information back? And the nice thing about, especially with like our Cloud Direct solution, as you pointed out in some previous slides, is, we have backup as a service, and we also have DR as a service, right? So backup as a service is the process where we're replicating your information on-prem, and off-site to our cloud. But the DR as a service adds compute to the equation, right? So what does that effectively look like if you needed to, for example, get your information back? You could literally turn on those computers or those servers in our infrastructure, allowing your business continuity plan to take shape. in essence, you're allowing your clients and users to work out of our cloud, and then protecting that information up there. So if any changes happen in the meantime, we get that back when we do, in essence, a failback. But the nice thing about, that process is you don't have to turn off the DR part of it, the compute part, because we're not actually, the clock's not running. You can compute on there as long as you need. But where you actually are sending the information back, your users are still continuing to work while the replication process is happening in reverse.
Fantastic. Last question I see here in the queue is about, hardware requirements. Is hardware required? Well, depending on the solution, right? Cloud Direct, no hardware is required for that solution. It's a direct to cloud backup product, right? So no on-site infrastructure is required for that. A Arcserve UDP solution, for instance, that's performing deduplication and a lot of other processes there. That product, there's a hardware side of it. It could be your own hardware using, a software license to deploy on your own hardware, or it could be one of our appliance, solutions where you're deploying our hardware, where, we support that hardware and everything like that. You pick up the phone, you call us. You don't have to worry about calling a different vendor or anything like that too. Plus, we have the fantastic deals around that right now too. So definitely would be something I would be looking at there. And then the high availability solution is really going to a destination, right? And that destination is, again, going to be dependent. Are you going to cloud, right? So then there really isn't a hardware side of that. Are you going to replicate up to, to a co-location? Well, in that co-location, you'd have some type of hardware sitting there, right, for that server for us to be replicating to. So a little bit of a different scenario there with the high availability solution. But, do you need to have hardware? No, but it really does depend on the solution, right? If I do have an on-site, appliance, right, where I'm keeping some retention, I'm not. I do have the advantage if I need to do my restores, I can restore from local. It'll be much quicker and everything like that as well. And it does give me the ability to also go to a destination such as cloud or another appliance that you might have out there at a colo. It gives you a lot of different options as far as that goes too.
And Stacey, I think we have one other question come up
Sure.
with regards to we're working with other states to house our backup and data recovery for customers, or are we just operating out of Florida?
Right. So, again, when we look at, I hate to use that term again, I apologize everybody, but when we look at where our locations are, our cloud locations, we have from Cloud Direct, we have, data centers in New Jersey and California. So if you're in Florida, you could replicate your data up to New Jersey or over to California, probably would be the safer bet, because then you're not on the East Coast. Like when you think of Sandy, right, it went up the East Coast, right, and it did some of its worst damage up in the New Jersey area. So definitely something to consider there, right? Do you want to move it all the way across to the other coast? If you look at some of our other solutions, right, we support public cloud with those too, right? So the public cloud, number one, when the Arcserve hybrid comes out solution for UDP, it'll be also utilizing those same Cloud Direct cloud data centers, which are in, New Jersey and California, so East Coast and West Coast. When we look at something like high availability solutions, right, you're going to go to one of your cloud locations, right, or colo locations, which probably I wouldn't recommend is in Florida, right? So you could go to public cloud even with that, right? Go to something like Amazon to give you that truly, let's get out of the state of Florida kind of protection. Let's go to the Midwest, or honestly, I don't know where their data centers are located, but definitely they're going to have some redundancy built into those too. So being able to take it and get that out of there. Long answer to, a short question, we don't house everything in Florida, right? As far as that goes.
Right. Okay. All right, so I think for the most part, we went through these questions. If anybody has anything additional they want to add really quick, that would be great. Otherwise, I think we can go ahead and turn it back over to Mary and let's wrap this up.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that presentation, Alex and Stacey, and answering all those questions. And thank you to our attendees for spending this time with us. I'll be sending out a recording of this later this week, so keep an eye out for that. And if you have any additional questions, you can reach out to us at arcserve.com. You can download trials, you can chat live with one of our reps, or find our phone number to call us directly. So thanks everybody for spending this time with us, and have a great rest of your day.